Hello everyone. So is it better to rent or to buy? Is it better to rent or to own your living space or property? When you pay rent, you are getting a service in return, a place to live in. What happens when you own a property and pay a mortgage? Are you also getting a service in return? When you pay for a mortgage, the service you received is money borrowed so that you can purchase a property to live in. So in the end, you are paying for the service of habitat or living space. If you have the choice to pay rent or mortgage to receive the same service, which one is better? It'll depend on many factors and where you live, the area you live in, but as a general rule, paying a mortgage and owning your property is better than renting. Here's why. So if we look at the advantages of owning. The advantages of owning and paying a mortgage is that you build equity, meaning when you pay a mortgage to a bank, a portion of your payment goes into capital, so that's money saved up, and a portion of your payment goes to interest, so that's money lost, that's the bank's profits. But when you pay rent to a landlord, all of it goes to the landlord, so that all of it is lost, that's money lost. This being said, isn't it obvious which option is better? Assuming you are able to sell your home for the same price you bought it at in 5 years. This means that any portion of your monthly mortgage payments that were paid towards capital or equity will be returned to you. But if you are renting, 100% of your monthly rent will never be returned to you. So in the case of the mortgage, only the interest portion is lost, but you gain back the capital that you have paid over the years, and you also gain any increase in the price of your home. So let's say you bought your house at 200K and you end up selling it at 230. Well, that 30K increase is profiting in your pockets. And you're also getting a portion of the mortgage payments that went into capital. So why would you still rent after this obvious benefit of owning? So let's look at an example with numbers to better visualize the advantage of owning versus renting. So if you have two scenarios where you can rent a place for $1,200 a month or buy a property which costs $200K. So as you can see on this website, ratehub.ca, a mortgage on $200K will cost you about, if you put 5% down, will cost you about $851, and with a 2.15 interest rate. Property taxes are about $200 a month and condo fees about $70 a month. So if you own your property, it'll cost you about $1,100 to $1,150 a month. So already there you're saving about $50 a month compared to the rent of $1,200 that you would be paying in the same scenario. But if we ignore that difference, so let's say we're paying the exact same thing. If we look at the scenario where we sell after 5 years, so let's look at how much we would have paid from our mortgage after 5 years. So here's an amortization schedule. So after 5 years, we will have paid $31,500 of our mortgage. So this portion here, this is capital. So if we sell our home at the same price we bought it at 200K, we just made 31K extra. So if we look at the scenario where we sell after 5 years, worst case scenario, we sell at the same price we bought our home at, the mortgage left on the 200K purchase would be around 166K. That's the balance left on our mortgage. So the difference of 31K, that's the capital we would gain for paying a mortgage for the past 5 years. A payment you were going to make anyways to live somewhere. But instead of giving it all away in rent, you gave a portion to the bank as interest, and a portion comes back to you. And all you have to do to put yourself in this excellent situation is have 5% down payment saved up and good credit and a stable job. Now, assuming the home sells for 220K, well, that's 30K from our capital paid down and 20K capital gain. So the difference between 220 and 200. So that's a total of 50K in our pocket just for owning instead of renting. Even after removing closing costs, you are still on top. Closing costs like notary fees, inspection, selling fees, welcome tax. You're still making more after if you wait after 5 years before selling. Now, what happens if you don't want to sell? No problem. You still have equity being built up in your property, available to you whenever you sell. And you can even withdraw that equity by taking a loan from the bank, which is called a home equity line of credit. So in both cases, you're increasing your net worth. So why not own instead of rent? Now notice in this example how our mortgage payment was similar to our rent payment. This is why it was beneficial to buy and not to rent. The mistake that occurs is when you decide to buy something more expensive than what you would have rented. For example, if your property is worth 400K, but you were satisfied with renting a place for $1,200 a month, then buying might not be beneficial for you because your monthly payment for that mortgage will be almost double your rent, and you'll be throwing away the same amount in interest to the bank. So let's see what that looks like. So if we had bought something at 400 with 5% down payment, same conditions. So just our mortgage payment alone is $1,700. So you're gonna have to add property taxes and condo fees, which is probably gonna be higher because it's a more expensive property. So you're looking at $2,100 per month. So if you could rent at $1,200, but but owning would cost you $2,100 a month, then it might not be better to own it. It might be better to rent, because let's look at how much interest you'd be paying. So you'd be paying $8,300, almost $8,000 a year in interest, which is about, let's see how much per month that gives us. So it's about $700 per month in interest. So whenever the rent payment is equal or similar to the mortgage payment, including property taxes and condo fees, of course, then it is without a doubt a better idea to own your property than to rent someone else's. There are other qualitative advantages to owning versus renting. Living in a place that belongs to you is a different feeling than living in a place that you know doesn't belong to you. The fact that you can't make the renovations you want is a restriction. Generally speaking, there are less restrictions when you own your place versus renting a place. For some people, that is a good enough reason to own a place, even if it will cost them more per month versus renting. But if you are someone who likes to evaluate things financially, as a general rule, if you don't plan on moving around for at least 5 years, and you're paying the same thing in rent versus potential owning costs, which is mortgage plus property taxes and condo fees, then it is better to own than to rent. So the disadvantages of owning is that you are more committed to your living space, meaning if you suddenly need to move to another country because you found a better job, you can't just get out of a mortgage payment. You'll have two choices in this case. You can either rent out your place, which is an excellent investment if you choose the right tenant, or you can sell your home. But if you sell your home, you need to make sure you are near the end of your mortgage term to avoid paying hefty penalty fees to the bank for breaking your mortgage term sooner. Thankfully, you can avoid these penalty fees by taking a variable mortgage rate, where you would only have to pay 3 months interest if you decide to sell your home before the mortgage term ends. So in our example, that would be about $1,200 in interest. So what are the advantages of renting? So the advantages of renting are that it could be cheaper depending on what you're looking for. You have more freedom if you are someone who doesn't stay in the same place for a long time. Also, if you're not someone who likes maintaining a place, then renting could be a better alternative. So, and disadvantages of renting. So the obvious disadvantages of renting is your rent payment goes to your landlord and you never get it back. In 5 years, you could end up paying $72K in rent, but all of it is lost. But if you were owning, you would pay the same thing in 5 years, but at least some of it comes back to you. And as we saw in our example, at least 30K comes back to you if worst case you sell the same price if you sell your property at the same price you bought it at. Also, you'll be living in space that doesn't belong to you, so you will always have some sort of restriction, smoking, for example, pets, etc. So in conclusion, if you're able to keep your property for at least 5 years and your potential rent equals your potential mortgage payment, then it is better to own. So now you decided to buy a mortgage and are looking to buy a property, and they're looking for a mortgage. So the best website to use to compare financial products in general is ratehub.ca. I'll have a link at the bottom in the description at the bottom of the video, which brings you to this website and where you can compare mortgage rates across several financial institutions. So what it does is the website scans potential financial institutions and returns the results, so you can have a good view on the available rates and therefore make sure you get the best rate every time. It avoids you from shopping around from bank to bank to get their mortgage rate. Also, you get access to mortgage brokers who deal with virtual banks who offer way more competitive rates than the regular banks. You can also try to negotiate with your banks to see if they can offer you the best rate you see thanks to ratehub.ca. But in most cases, the banks won't be able to match the rates that you get online. And even if they do, there is no advantage to going with a bank versus a virtual bank, because their other fees will be higher, like the penalties if you decide to break a mortgage term. Also, would you trust someone who doesn't give you their best rate to begin with? They only offer you their best rate when you've presented them with a competing offer, and that's the only time they give you a better rate. Why didn't they give you their bottom line to begin with? Now let's look at how ratehub.ca works. So simple. It allows you to compare financial products. So if we want to look at mortgages, just click on mortgages. Already gives you just enter the information. I'm buying a home, rate type fixed or variable, the term 1 to 5 years, location, compare rates. And as you can see here, it gives you a list of the banks and their featured rates. And so here you just put in the price of your home, the down payment that you plan on putting, rate type fixed or variable. So the biggest difference between fixed and variable, obviously fixed, the interest rate is fixed, doesn't change during the term, but it's going to be a little bit higher to begin with because you're protecting yourself. And the problem with fixed is that if you decide to get out of a mortgage, let's say you take a 5 years fixed term and you decide to sell your house after 3 years, well, there's going to be hefty penalty fees just to get out of a mortgage term that is fixed. But if you take a variable rate, so your interest rate to begin with will be lower than the fixed rate, but obviously it's variable. So if the bank decides to increase if the Bank of Canada decides to increase their lending rate, which affects the bank's prime rate, then your mortgage rate is going to increase accordingly. But the advantage of variable is it's also a 5-year term. But the advantage is if you decide to sell before your term, the penalties are only 3 months interest, which is not that much. It's going to be less than $2,000. But with a fixed term, it could go up to $10,000 or more, depending on your mortgage amount. So yeah, so that would be the difference between fixed and variable. So you enter your information and then you let's put 5%, and then it gives you a choice. So here you got trust company, you have MCAP, you have First National, TD Bank, you have Scotiabank, and it gives you the rate, and it gives you some details about the mortgage. But then obviously you can just click on here, enter your information, and someone will give you a call back. So it's a pretty useful website to compare and shop around for financial products. So yeah, so that's my opinion on renting versus buying. Is it better to rent or to own? So if you have any questions or comments or feedback, just leave them in the comments below. Thank you.